The 8 main islands of Hawaii are home to 19 volcanoes. There have been more than 75 recorded eruptions in the last 200 years. So-called Big Island is twice as large as all of the other islands combined. It's not just one, but 5 volcanoes grown together: Kohala, Mauna Kea, Hualalai, Kilauea, and Mauna Loa. These 5 volcanoes are a dominating presence, forcing all of the residents to live in a circle on the perimeter of the island. Kohala last erupted 120,000 years ago, while Mauna Kea has been quiet for 4,000. Their especially long slumbers signal that an eruption from either is highly unlikely, but often overlooked is their sibling to the south. Eruption in 1801 produced almost 400 million cubic yards of extremely fluid, fast-moving lava flows. Molten rock covered nearly 75,000 acres of land and sea. This is an area equivalent to Manhattan, San Francisco, and Miami combined. If Hualalai were to erupt again, its impact could be devastatingly quick.
It would not take very long.
Kilauea earned the title World's Safest Volcano for its stunning lava fountains and slow-moving flows that can be viewed from close proximity.
The current eruption of Kilauea actually began in 1983. In fact, it's been erupting virtually continuously since that time.
But all that lava needs to go somewhere. The same slow flows that have carved some of the most stunning views on the island have also destroyed 181 houses and 8 miles of highway since 1983. But Kilauea hides an even more dangerous secret. It is home to the biggest explosive eruptions in Hawaii's history. The same eruption threw boulders weighing several tons a distance of 3,000 feet. Volcanic ash shot 2 miles up and turned day into night in towns 25 miles away.
Yes, Kilauea can be very benign, but it can also be very dangerous under other circumstances.
But of greater concern to officials is the enormous volcano to the west. Its name is Mauna Loa. Massive earthquakes have historically preceded every major eruption at Mauna Loa. Feared most is a repeat of what occurred in 1868. Little in the way of photos or illustrations exists, but early missionaries recorded well over 300 earthquakes in a span of 4 days. The largest of these is believed to have measured magnitude 8. By comparison, this quake was 11 times more powerful than the 1989 San Francisco and the 1994 Northridge quakes, both of which measured 6.9. It was all just a prelude to the lava flow from Mauna Loa.
The eruption started at about 5,000 feet and zoomed down to the ocean in a matter of 2 hours.
77 deaths were confirmed, but this is likely well below the actual toll.
The 1868 was the big one, the real big one. And this could happen again.
So, we are due for another major eruption in the next 10 years. Lava from a smaller eruption in 1950 followed the exact same flow path. Rare footage of that event gives an idea of what a similar eruption. In 1950, there was little in the way of resorts or housing developments. In fact, there were as many cattle as there were people. Had the island been more populated, the eruption could have been a true mega-disaster.
Well, the 1950 eruption of Mauna Loa was probably very, very spectacular. There was a fissure system that propagated and stayed open over a 15-kilometer length. Along the entire length, there was lava gushing out of the ground.
The lava formed what is called a curtain of fire, literally a wall of molten rock 600 feet high and 2 miles long.
From the time that the eruption broke out, in about 3 hours' time, it was able to travel quite a few miles to approach the highway, and then it soon crossed the highway and actually went into the village and actually destroyed some houses.
35 minutes later, the flow entered the ocean, but it would continue on for 23 days and become the most voluminous eruption ever recorded in the island's history. Despite having the primary escape route, Highway 11, cut off, everyone reached safety. For some, it was a close call. Today, it might be a different story. The Big Island of today is much different from the one that was devastated by the events of 1868 and 1950. The once small port of Hilo is now the second largest city in the state of Hawaii and a major agricultural business hub. On the other side of the island, the relatively unpopulated Kona coast has become home to billions of dollars worth of upscale properties and luxury resorts.
We're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $10 to $15 billion.
Major land collapse, simultaneous eruptions. The volcanic history of the Big Island shows that not only can anything happen, it most likely already has. The Big Island of Hawaii has been rocked by volcanic eruptions and earthquakes throughout its history. And scientific monitoring shows that these monsters still have plenty of life left in them. The earliest records were established by Polynesian settlers who arrived 1,000 years ago.
There was no written language up to 18.
Modern scientists believe many of these folktales are loosely based on actual eruptions, but that they are unreliable. A more precise geologic record began when Western settlers first arrived in 1778. With the devastating earthquakes and eruption of 1868, Mauna Loa quickly became recognized as one of the most dangerous volcanoes on the island. Less than 1 million years old, an infant in geological terms, Mauna Loa has grown to almost 14,000 feet above sea level, making it the tallest active volcano on the planet. 60 miles wide at its widest point, its name translates as Long Mountain.
Mauna Loa.
The weight has even caused parts of the island to collapse into the sea.
All Hawaiian volcanoes, in fact, have a tendency to fall apart as they grow larger and larger. And Mauna Loa is no exception. It's had a number of large landslides where the volcano has failed catastrophically and released huge amounts of debris into the ocean.
Alika II, the biggest of these landslides, occurred roughly 100,000 years ago. They debated the waves may have been strong enough to hit the coasts of both Japan and North America. If a similar event happened today, some scientists say 300-foot waves could drown Los Angeles in a matter of hours. However, such a collapse isn't expected for at least another 10,000 years.
If you worry about lightning strikes, then you might worry about an Alika II.
Volcanologists have their hands full just in studying Mauna Loa's eruptive history and accompanying earthquakes. Since a more detailed record began in 1832, Mauna Loa has erupted an astounding 39 more times. Most of Mauna Loa's eruptions in the last 150 years have begun at eruption sites, also called vents, near the volcano's remote cloud-covered summit.
Called just a curtain of fire as lava seems to fountain along a long stretch of fissure that can be miles long. Over time, this fissure tends to focus at a single point, and that's where most of the fountaining and activity is concentrated.
The area around these fractures is called a rift zone, and it determines the direction the lava will flow. Whichever way that is, it's going to be fast, because Mauna Loa's steep slopes cause lava to travel as quickly as 9 feet per second. In that eruption, the lava flowed in a different direction than it had in 1868 and 1950.
Towards Hilo. They stopped several miles short of the town, but it was a reminder of the potential for lava to flow right into the largest city on the island.
16 square miles of land were paved with lava in just 3 weeks. Fortunately, most of the property buried by lava in 1984 was uninhabited land owned by the state. Had the eruption been bigger, it might have put 40,000 people in serious jeopardy. The 1984 event also demonstrated something just as disconcerting, that eruptions could come from more than one volcano at the same time.
Erupted.
It's proof that literally anything can happen on the Big Island.
It's all completely.
There's been at least $3 billion in property development just since 1984, and the tourist industry has exploded. Yet the main escape route for any eruption remains a single highway which encircles the island. A major eruption would undoubtedly destroy the economy of the tiny island, not to mention the cost in human life. The volcanoes here pose innumerable dangers to residents and tourists alike. Earthquakes and eruptions aren't the only risks from these fiery beasts. Even relatively quiet volcanoes can injure and kill. When most people think of volcanoes, they imagine violent, explosive eruptions. Definitely not a potential vacation destination. Yet the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island is the single most popular tourist attraction in the state. The slow-moving yet voluminous flows help create the unique shape of the so-called shield volcanoes here. But the sluggishness also makes it possible for tourists to get up close and personal.
1,000 visit the active eruption site a day.
It is probably one of the few places in the world where a non-scientist can observe eruptions safely under the right kinds of conditions.
And they can even see new land being formed. 560 acres have been created since 1983.
Some people call them lava shelves, other people call them lava deltas or lava benches. So a variety of names are used for these features. When the lava finally reaches the ocean after traveling for about, well, 8 or 9 miles from where it's first erupted, it forms these shelves.
Flash onto this hot lava. Well, the lava is several hundreds of degrees centigrade, and basically you'll be cooked like in a parboiled, and so people have died from that cause.
The odds are that nothing serious is going to happen to the average tourist during a brief trip to the island of Hawaii. But the 150,000 people who live here must deal with a variety of other hazards. The high levels of sulfur dioxide in VOG has been linked to respiratory disorders and even heart troubles. Then there are the countless earthquakes that strike the island every year. Many are too small to be felt, but some can't be ignored. The 2006 earthquake measured 6.7, but the earthquakes of 1868 reached a magnitude 8, 12 times more intense. And such an occurrence could be the precursor to another major event, a volcanic eruption. The Hawaii Volcano Observatory is run by the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, to study and attempt to forecast future activity. As the earthquake frequency increases, it becomes easier to determine when and where an eruption might occur. But there's more to volcanoes than earthquakes. If the ground is tilting or changing shape, then there's a good chance magma is on the move below. Satellites send signals to GPS antennas like this one to measure ground level changes in yet another way. The same accumulation shows up in this radar interferogram, a technique where radar is used to measure changes in topography. But forecasting when a volcano might strike is only half the equation. The other part is anticipating what areas might be affected. Next, the hidden dangers lurking beneath some of the homes in paradise. effort to keep the Big Island of Hawaii safe from volcanic eruptions, scientists are working hard to determine what areas might be affected. Fortunately, history has a habit of repeating itself. Using little more than a hammer, a hand lens, and a field notebook, geologists have mapped 30,000 years of eruptive flows and rift zones. The USGS regularly makes recommendations to local planning boards on public safety issues. Whatever the next big eruption looks like, it will wreak havoc on this true island paradise. Earthquakes and power outages are just the beginning for the wildly unpredictable main event, a Hawaii mega eruption. It's happened before, and scientists know that it will happen again. The question is, when? A major volcanic eruption. While scientific monitoring may give us several weeks of warning before an eruption, history has shown that these mounds of fire and lava are anything but predictable. A 1975 eruption at Mauna Loa was preceded only by an earthquake 2 hours earlier. Hualalai has been silent for 200 years, but seismic activity reveals that it could reawaken any day now. Kilauea's current eruption is containable, but it doesn't always act as anticipated.
Kilauea has this reputation of being a volcano that never explodes, but we've learned in recent years that Kilauea does explode.
The simultaneous eruptions of Kilauea and Mauna Loa in 1984 raised even more destructive possibilities.
But we cannot exclude it.
With this in mind, here is but one potential mega-disaster, which scientists and emergency officials have theorized. 5 a.m., sometime in the near future at the height of tourist season. The small city of Kailua Kona is shaken from its slumber by a massive 7.0 earthquake emanating from the island's west coast.
Of this island.
The tremors aren't emanating from the anticipated area around Mauna Loa. Instead, they appear to be originating farther north, beneath Hualalai.
Hualalai is very much an active volcano, although it has not erupted now for 200 years. But it has the potential of erupting again, clearly. It is not dead by any means. So most of the tourist resorts are on the west side of the island. So a reactivation or an eruption of Hualalai could be trouble.
Then the seismographs at the Hawaii Volcano Observatory begin going haywire. Trouble is indeed brewing in Hualalai. Though most are too small to be felt, more than 700 earthquakes have been recorded. Authorities make the decision to sound the alert sirens shortly before Hualalai wakes up from its 200-year slumber. Molten rock begins flowing to the coast. Within 35 minutes, the lava reaches the beachside resorts and Kona Airport. At any given time, there are an estimated 30,000 residents and tourists in the area. Most will be forced to evacuate. Many of these people will be able to return home in a few weeks, but thousands could come back to find all of their belongings buried under hardened lava. According to USGS studies, property damage alone could easily be in the hundreds of millions. But the tragedy may not be over yet. Due to underground shifting near Hualalai's deflating magma chambers, Mauna Loa begins swelling even further. Indications point to a possible lava outbreak in the southwest rift zone, the same origin of both the 1868 and 1950 eruptions. History has proven that anything is possible when it comes to volcanoes. So USGS volcanologists decide to prepare for potential disaster. The people attempt to leave the island, but it is difficult due to the road conditions.
The ability to evacuate people in the event of emergency is a challenge when you have infrastructure that is limited with only one highway.
Then it gets worse. An 8.2 earthquake rips across the entire island. Aside from damage to just about every building on the island, the earthquake has also opened a fissure 2 miles long near the summit of Mauna Loa. Lava spews into the air, creating a wall of fire, and begins speeding down the southwest flank. But unlike 1950, hundreds of homes, not a few isolated ranches, are permanently buried beneath several feet of lava while it incinerates its way down to the water. Death is an inevitability for some, as there is only a 3-hour window of opportunity for escape. But the carnage still doesn't end. The lava and earthquakes will continue for weeks, destroying many farms on the southwest end of the island. With the destruction of homes, tourist resorts, and the agriculture industry, property damage could reach more than $10 billion. Buildings